Hi, I'm the Warrior Witch, and you can call me Nike. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is really important to me and I feel very passionate about, and that is starter witch supplies. Right now we're in a little bit of an aesthetic trend online where a lot of the witchy stuff comes with aesthetic things to go with it, and there seems to be this implication that if it's not really cool looking, it's not really aesthetic, it's not real witchcraft, and it's not really gonna work. And that's not true at all. The thing we need to remember is that historically, witches have worked with what they had. This means that they're not going to be able to go out to some store and get some super fancy knife and a really cool display case for all their crystals. They just had what they had, and a lot of their things they made themselves. So we need to keep that in mind now, that just because we have these things available, and if you want to get those things, that's fine, but we don't need them in order for our magic to work correctly. I already spoke about this a little bit in my Grimoires and Book of Shadows video, but you don't need a really special fancy book to write down all your spells and your workings and your informations in. You can use a school notebook, you can use scrap papers, you can use a sketchbook lying around that you haven't touched in a while. You can use anything you have at your disposal. If you can write on it, you can make that your Book of Shadows, you can make that your grimoire. You also don't need fancy pens and inks to make sigils. You can just use notebook paper and a pen. I suggest pen over pencil only because it makes it more permanent, but you can just use your regular Bic pen you got that cost 10 cents. Another big one I see is about candles, and we see all these really cool spell candles online and we think we need something super special and fancy, and again, we really don't. You can even use scented candles you buy at the store. If the candle smell corresponds with your intention, even better, and color magic can be used with that as well. It can be really powerful even if it's cheap. As for things you may have around your home, kitchen herbs are super useful and super powerful. You may find me talking a lot about how I really love cinnamon, but part of that is because it's so easy to get and has so many uses. You can put it into things for tea and coffee magic, which is another topic I'll cover very briefly. Rosemary, bay, oregano, thyme, onion and garlic powder, all these things can be used in your witchcraft, and they're right in your kitchen most of the time. They're really common, and even more common than that, even if you don't have any herbs because for some reason you don't cook with spices, shame on you. Salt and pepper are going to be everywhere. They are basics. Salt is great for cleansing, pepper is great for protection and banishing, and you can use them for a lot of different things in your craft. As I mentioned before, tea and coffee magic is going to be really big. You can stir in your intentions for the day, you could stir clockwise to bring into you and counterclockwise to send away. If you want to bring in peace and love, you can stir that in while stating your intention. You could add in honey, which is another really big one, to sweeten something, to sweeten your intention. And you could even draw a sigil in honey at the bottom of your cup before you pour whatever you're drinking for that day. Another big thing is finding things outside. Now this one I'm going to caution. If you're getting plants from outside, please don't ingest them unless you know that the source is safe. Especially if you're in the city, a lot of things are going to have pollution and runoff from all sorts of nasty things you don't want to be ingesting. So only use those as dried goods that are not meant to be ingested if you're going to get them from outside. When it comes to things you find outside, please research first. If you're not entirely sure what that thing is, or it's just a common thing you see around but you don't really know specifically any scientific facts about it, look that up. Even really cool looking plants can be deadly. Things like lily of the valley is poisonous. You want to make sure you're not ingesting the wrong thing. Pick up a field guide. I know that magic is fun, but the practical side of it is also really important. Get a field guide for your area. I happen to have a North American field guide of edible plants, so I can identify things more easily. Always research before you ingest. Always research before you use anything at all. The same goes for things like stones. I know it's not in the same vein of things that you can find around your house or outside, but for example, if a stone is going to be dangerous if you put it into water, like malachite. Malachite makes water toxic, so you need to make sure that no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're using, research that thing. This also applies to things that might be more mundane, like store-bought roses. Rose water is a really common thing that a lot of people like to use, and it is lovely, but roses, when they're bought at the store, might still have lingering pesticides, preservatives, Other things that you definitely don't want to ingest. So if you're going to use store-bought roses for any of your workings, please don't ingest them. Please don't use them to be something that you put into your body, because that can really make you sick. This also goes similarly with bird feathers. I know it's a lot of warnings, but a big part of witchcraft is you need to be safe. Just with spiritual protection and cleansing and all those things, you need to physically be safe when you're using things. I showed in my travel altar that I have a little bird feather that I got outside, but I mentioned that I washed it. This is because bird feathers can be really gross. They can carry all sorts of nasty things. They can carry diseases. They can carry all sorts of things you don't want to be touching. So when you get anything from outside that can be washed, please wash it. This includes stones too. River stones, wash them. You don't know what's been in that river. You don't know what things have been around. You don't know what sort of pollution is in that area. Make sure you wash it. You can grow things yourself, but not everyone is going to have that option available to them. I know that I don't, because I'm a college student and I don't really have a lot of room, so I can't grow a lot of my own herbs myself. That's why kitchen herbs in the grocery store can be really important, because you can get all those things and know that they are food grade, and know that they are safe to ingest. Other things you can find outside are going to be like rocks. You don't necessarily need to have a bunch of fancy crystals in order to still work with the earth. As an example, this is a river stone I found once. It's really nice, it's really big, it's smooth and flat on both sides, so I could use it as a candle holder. I could draw a sigil on it and use that for an intention. I could draw symbols of the elements. I could do just about anything. And smaller stones like that could be used for things like runes. You don't have to go out and buy your own rune set, you could make it yourself. You could draw on it with marker or paint if you happen to have that available, and then you could cover that with any sort of varnish. It could even be nail polish for those of you that might paint your nails or have that available to you. If you live by the ocean or anywhere that might have shells available, you can grab those as well. You can use those if you're a little bit more sea-oriented. You could similarly paint symbols and runes on them if you like, and they could be used for all sorts of things. I know that some people even use them to set offerings in. You can get really big ones, and so it can be a really nice dish to set things in. If they're smaller, you could give a little bit of food or water and just place it inside until it needs to be put away back to the earth. Eggshells are a really great thing to include too. I like to use them, like I mentioned, in my protection jar for protection, because they are a physical barrier around the baby as it's growing. And you can get this in your kitchen probably, at your local grocery store definitely, and it's usually pretty cheap. The other thing about kitchen herbs is, I know you'll see a lot of people with really cool jars for all their herbs, but just because they exist doesn't mean you have to use them. I have bay leaves in a mason jar. It's not super fancy. Again, you can just get it at Walmart, but it is a step above the usual plastic containers from the grocery store. But I still also have the grocery store plastic containers. They work just fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Yeah, they might not look the prettiest, but it's a container. There's nothing wrong with a simple plastic container that it came in. Another big part about witchcraft is reusing things, recycling. We like to use what we can find, but this includes things that you've already used. So for example, I had a pickle jar, and once all the pickles were eaten, I tossed it in the dishwasher, cleaned it out, and put my little chime candles in there. Granted, they still smell like pickles, just a little bit. So whatever you put in there is probably gonna smell a little bit like whatever thing was in there last, depending on how strong the smell is. But it is a perfectly viable container. It's huge. I mean, it's a big container compared to even my mason jar. I can store a lot more in there than anything else. This was a candle that I was given by one of my relatives. It's got a lovely little cork top, so I know that I can only use dry goods in there, but it's a great size. I mean, it's sturdy, it's glass, it's nice. When you get done with a candle that is in a nice container, try to heat it up. If you can put it in water and slowly raise the temperature to melt all the wax out, that would be good. You can microwave them if you're very careful and don't do it for long, and if you've taken out the wick, because often wicks have a metal bottom to keep them in there. So you want to pry that out as much as you can, dig out as much of the wax as you can, and then anything that's left, heat it up in whatever method you like, and then wipe it out. I like to do it with paper towels, just because it's easy to then dispose of them and not have to worry about the wax. And there you go. Now you have a nice new jar for any of your stuff. Altar supplies. So for your altar, you'll see a lot of fancy athames and chalices and all these pretty things that a lot of people have, but you don't have to have those fancy aesthetic things. You can use a mug from your kitchen or a regular glass and a butter knife. Yes, it really can be that. It just has to be the symbolic thing. For keeping moon water, it can be a glass from your kitchen, it can be a water bottle. I've even used bottles of juice that I've finished and washed out. It doesn't matter what the vessel is, as long as it works. Use what you have. A lot of people like to make their own things from sticks or from air dry clay. That's really useful, and you can paint them to whatever you want. You can shape them into whatever size you need. It's really easy, and you can make it entirely customizable to you. When it comes to kitchen supplies for making oils, you can use olive oil or grapeseed oil or even canola oil if you know what you're doing. You can put it into any jar. I like to use a mason jar for my spell oils. They come in 2 different sizes usually, the full size and the half size, so if you only need a little versus a lot, you can have that size difference. A lot of witchcraft means being creative, so look up things online, learn to make things, look around you and think, how could I use that? If I changed its purpose, if I didn't know it was, say, a candle, and I just looked at the container itself, or I just looked at the materials themselves, what could I do with those? You'll be surprised at things that you'll come up with. Look online, see what things other people are doing. Interacting with your witch community can be really helpful because it can give you ideas for things that you can do, things that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before. When I saw little tiny travel altars based on the elements, I thought that was genius. If you can think it, you can probably make it. Alright, that's it for me this week, so blessed be, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!